Friends, one day 4 men arrived at the king's court and accused a woman of committing a heinous and despicable act. They claimed, "This woman has engaged in an indecent act with a dog to satisfy her desires." Upon hearing this, the king was furious and immediately summoned the woman to the court. When she arrived, she vehemently denied all the accusations, stating, "Your Majesty, I have not shown my honor to any man for the past 2 years." The king then ordered the royal midwife to examine her to verify the truth of her claims. The midwife lowered her gaze and prepared to conduct the examination. As soon as the midwife began to inspect the woman's body, the woman became restless and started screaming, "What are you doing to me?" The midwife firmly held her and said, "This is absolutely necessary to prove your innocence." The woman lowered her head and swore by Allah, "These accusations are false. I have done no such thing." However, the midwife paid no heed to her words and continued the examination. After a while, the midwife noticed some unusual marks on the woman's body and exclaimed, "Your Majesty, this woman is lying. Her body bears signs that suggest she has been involved in an illicit relationship with an animal." Hearing this, the entire court erupted in chaos. The king's face showed a mix of deep thought and anger. He scrutinized the woman from head to toe and asked again, "Are these accusations true? Why were you hiding the truth from us?" The woman once again insisted, "Your Majesty, I am not lying. These accusations are false." The king took a deep breath and said, "If everything is false, then why are you so afraid? Why can't you look me in the eye and speak?" The woman replied, "The marks on my body are actually..." Before she could finish, the entire court fell silent. The king demanded, "Tell me the truth. How did these marks come to be?" The woman replied, "The person who brought me here is responsible for this, and he is present in this court right now." As soon as these words were spoken, the court was thrown into turmoil once again. Everyone's eyes turned to the man the woman had accused. People began glancing at each other nervously. The king, now enraged, immediately summoned the 4 men who had brought the accusations against the woman. When they were brought before the court, none of them could meet the king's gaze. Fear was evident in their eyes. The king observed each of them carefully and asked, "Did you falsely accuse this woman?" For a moment, they all remained silent. Suddenly, one of them spoke up, "Your Majesty, we have done no wrong. We heard about this accusation from another person." The king, now even more furious, shouted, "And you dared to accuse a woman of such a grave crime without any evidence or investigation? Tell me, who is this person who informed you?" The men exchanged nervous glances but remained silent. The king's angry eyes made it clear that he would not spare them unless they revealed the truth. Finally, they were forced to confess. One of them mustered the courage to say, "Your Majesty, that person is present in this court, but we do not know him. We only know that he is connected to this woman's life." Upon hearing this, the king roared, "Bring that person before me immediately." Shortly after, the doors of the court opened, and the accused man was brought in. His face was pale with fear, and he could barely muster the courage to step into the court. The king, in a furious tone, demanded, "Are you the one responsible for this?" The court fell silent once again. The man replied, "Your Majesty, this is false. I have done no such thing." The fire of anger still burned in the king's eyes. The king said, "If you are innocent, then why are you so afraid? Why can't you speak clearly?" Hearing this, the man fell silent. Everyone in the court waited in astonishment for the king's verdict. The king announced, "Once again we will investigate this matter thoroughly and justice will be served. The truth will be uncovered, and if these accusations are proven false, the accusers will not be spared." These words caused another uproar in the court. Everyone was eager to see how the matter would unfold. Those who had initially praised the king and cheered for his decisions now sat in silence, as the situation had become deeply mysterious. Everyone waited with bated breath for the final judgment. After a while, the king ordered the woman to be brought back to the court. She was immediately presented before the king. The king's gaze fell upon the woman, who was now wrapped in a white cloth, her face completely covered, revealing only her eyes. She stood silently before the king. As soon as she entered the court, chaos erupted once again. People began making all sorts of accusations against her. When the king observed her closely, he was astonished to think how such a modest, veiled woman could commit such a grave sin. The king addressed her again. "Listen. You have been accused of engaging in an illicit relationship with an animal. I ask you again, is this true? These 4 men claim that you are a prostitute. Have you forgotten that such relationships are forbidden in our Sharia? Anyone who commits such a crime, whether man or woman, is sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you not know the punishment for adultery in Islam?" Hearing this, the woman burst into tears. The king was puzzled by her strange behavior. He couldn't understand why she was crying instead of answering. He watched her for a while, but her tears did not stop. Then, he called the royal midwife again and ordered her to conduct a more thorough examination of the woman to determine the truth. Shortly after, the royal midwife arrived in the court. The king explained everything to her, and the woman was taken inside the palace chambers for a more detailed examination. Everyone in the court waited anxiously for the midwife's report. The king turned his attention to the 4 men, who stood silently with their heads bowed. After some time, the midwife came running out of the chambers, screaming. Her cries startled everyone in the court, even the king, who rose from his throne. The midwife seemed to be on the verge of revealing a shocking truth but hesitated to speak in front of so many people. The king gestured for her to be silent and ordered her to go inside the chambers. He himself followed her into the palace. The court erupted in chaos once again. Some continued to make wild accusations against the woman, while others began to defend her. After a while, the king emerged from the chambers. His expression made it clear that the situation had taken a dramatic turn. Behind him, the woman, still wrapped in the white cloth, stepped out. The king glared at the 4 men and said, "All of you except one may leave the court. You will be summoned later." The 3 men exchanged fearful glances and left the court. The king then addressed the remaining man. "You claim that there is a dog in this woman's house and that you saw it with your own eyes. Tell me, what is the color of the dog?" Hearing this, the man fell silent. Everyone in the court stared at him in shock. The king continued to interrogate him, his sharp eyes fixed on the man. When the man failed to respond, the king demanded, "Answer quickly. What is the color of the dog?" The man, now flustered, stammered, "Your Majesty, the dog is brown." As soon as the answer was given, an unusual silence filled the court. Upon hearing the man's response, the king nodded his head affirmatively. The king gazed at the man deeply, lost in thought. After a moment, he sent the man out and ordered the second person to enter the court. When the second person was asked the same question, he replied, "The dog is black." Once again, the king nodded affirmatively. However, everyone present in the court was staring at the king in astonishment. When the third person was asked about the color of the dog, he said, "The dog is white." And when the fourth person was asked, he claimed, "The dog is red." Hearing this, the king immediately commanded the soldiers to bring the dog into the court. The 4 individuals were asked to stand once again in front of the court. Within a few moments, the soldiers brought the dog in. The dog, however, was neither brown, white, black, nor red. Instead, it had a mixture of all the colors as Allah had created it in that way. Upon seeing the dog, the 4 individuals began whispering among themselves. Their expressions clearly revealed that they had been caught in their lies. The king turned to the woman, who had been looking at him with helpless eyes. The king then addressed the woman, saying, "According to your statement, you haven't done anything with this dog. So tell me, why are these 4 people accusing you of such a grave offense?" The woman replied in a serious tone, "Your Majesty, I haven't harmed anyone. I always stay in my house. I neither go outside to meet men nor do I speak to them, yet I don't understand why these people keep accusing me behind my back. What crime have I committed that they are chasing after my honor? I am helpless. My marriage lasted only a year and then my husband passed away. After that, people began exploiting the situation." Upon hearing these words from the woman, the court fell into silence once again. The king looked at the 4 individuals with a suspicious gaze. The woman continued to cry. She said to the king, I rarely go outside unless absolutely necessary, yet people continue to talk ill about me. I knew that living alone in this world would be difficult. I had neither the shadow of my parents nor my husband's, nor any elder sibling to support me. That is why I turned to Allah for help. I used to confide all my complaints to Allah. I have many needs at home, yet I never engaged in any sinful actions or committed any wrongdoings. As people saw my piety, they began to respect me. Even those who had previously taken advantage of my helplessness stopped doing so. But there are still people in this world who do not allow widows to live peacefully, and these four are just like them. Your Majesty, when my husband was alive, I never even stepped outside the house. He took care of the household's earnings while I stayed at home, taking care of him and managing the household. But after my husband's death due to a serious illness, I confined myself within the house. I began staying inside, praying to Allah and worshiping Him. One day I had gone outside for an important task. As I was returning home, I saw a small puppy lying on the road, severely wounded. I looked around and saw there was no water supply nearby. Seeing the puppy panting, I assumed it must be thirsty. I picked it up in my arms and took it home. I took care of the puppy, applied medicine to its wounds and gave it water. Slowly, the puppy began to recover and became very fond of me. Having the innocent little puppy at home made me feel a bit better. After my prayers, I would sometimes talk to this helpless creature. It felt like it was a real person listening to everything I said with full attention. From that day on, the puppy started living with me at home and never went outside. Then one day I had to go out for some urgent work. Since there was no man in the house, I had to do everything on my own, big or small. Whenever I went out, four men would stand on the street corner and leer at me, making inappropriate comments. One day they crossed all boundaries. Following me, they reached my house. Terrified, I ran inside and locked the door, hearing their laughter from the other side. But the harassment didn't end there. Whenever I left my house, they would laugh at me and make nasty remarks. One day they crossed all lines. I was at home with my little puppy when one of them came and said he wanted to spend the night with me. His words terrified me. I didn't know who he was, so I told him from behind the door, "I haven't opened a brothel here for you to come and ask to spend the night with me." These men had humiliated me and said vile things, but I never took any action against them. Perhaps that was my biggest mistake. I hadn't seen the man's face who spoke to me that day, but maybe he was one of these four men. The next morning, another man came to my door and began saying similar crude things to me. He told me, "I have fallen in love with you. I want to spend time with you. In return, I will give you anything you need, money, wealth, anything you want." I couldn't understand who he was, so I went to the door and told him, "If you love me so much, marry me. I cannot be involved in any illicit relationship." As soon as I said that, he replied, "I have no problem marrying you, but I'm already married. I have 4 wives and they brought a lot of wealth with them. If I marry you, my life will be much more difficult. So, I'm willing to give you lots of wealth, but I cannot marry you." Hearing this, I shut the door on him. From then on, I became afraid to go outside for any reason. I started praying to Allah for protection from these cruel men. After that, people began gathering in front of my house, throwing stones at my door, calling me a disgraceful woman, a prostitute, and using even worse language to insult me. I couldn't even leave my house. I didn't understand why this was happening to me when I had done nothing wrong. The woman broke down in tears as she spoke. Seeing her cry, the king turned to the 4 men, who were silently watching her with their heads lowered. They remained completely silent. One of them spoke, "This woman is lying. Nothing like this happened. She's making up stories." The king spoke up, "Is this woman lying, or are you the ones lying?" Then, when the puppy was brought into the court, everyone in the village, including the 4 men, was shocked. The reason was that the color of the dog was not at all what the 4 men had described. It became clear to them that they had been caught. At that moment, they began to fake cry and beg the king, saying, "Your Majesty, please forgive us." But the king looked at them with disdain and said, "You have tried to blame an innocent woman. Will you admit your crime yourselves, or should I deliver your punishment?" They said, "No, Your Majesty, please have mercy on us. Our intentions were truly wrong." When we found out that this woman was a widow, young and very beautiful, we thought we would take advantage of her. We tried many times to get involved in an illicit relationship with her, but she is a virtuous woman. She never agreed to our advances. One day when I went to her house with my proposal, I heard the sound of a dog barking from her house. I was surprised by the barking. I realized that this woman was not alone at home. She had a dog with her. At that moment I got a wicked idea. I thought I would accuse this woman of having an illicit relationship with the dog and disgrace her in front of the entire village because she had rejected my advances and insulted me. That was the way to teach her a lesson. So, my 3 friends and I started spreading rumors about this woman throughout the village. We told everyone that she kept a dog at her house and used the dog to fulfill her desires. The villagers believed us easily, and they began to think of her as an immoral woman. "Your Majesty, please forgive us. Sister, please forgive us as well." The king then said, "No, there is no forgiveness for your sin. The punishment for such a crime is only death. You have falsely accused a virtuous and pure woman." According to Islamic law, the king pronounced the 4 men guilty and sentenced them to a harsh punishment. The villagers stoned them to death. This incident teaches us the importance of protecting a woman's honor and the severe consequences of falsely accusing her. One day, a man had made indecent proposals to this woman, but when she repeatedly rejected him, he conspired and made such a huge false accusation against her. When this case reached the king, he conducted a proper investigation and punished the criminals. Furthermore, the king arranged for a widow from the village to marry a young man, covering all the expenses of their wedding and providing them with wealth to ensure they would have a smooth life ahead. At the same time, he executed the 4 criminals in front of the entire village. They were hung upside down from a tree in the field, and the villagers stoned them to death. From this incident, we learn that Allah always protects His righteous servants and saves them from false accusations. May Allah protect us from false accusations and guide us to always follow the path of truth and justice.